Hello, brothers. Welcome to the Bald Brother podcast. Today, we're going to be going over men's mental health. It's kind of like the motif for this month since it is National Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. I think a pertinent topic and one that we get often is about regarding therapy and ways to kind of cope with mental health struggles that might be a little more accessible than going to therapy. I know for myself, even the prospect of going to therapy before I even ever went was kind of daunting. You always kind of think that what happens if I find out something that is severely wrong with me and I just have been like living with this for a long time. And I think that fear and anxiety can kind of exacerbate the issue. Thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I think while there's less stigma than there used to be about going to therapy or going to see a therapist, it's still kind of intimidating for a lot of people. Could be just because, like what you said, there people are afraid of facing some of their inner demons or afraid of what might come out in a session. But also, I know costs sometimes can be prohibitive too. So I know today we wanted to maybe explore some alternate options to more traditional therapy because I think it's still important to address your mental health. And even if that doesn't mean going to a licensed therapist, there are still other ways to approach that. And I'll just share an experience that I had that really helped me, which was finding a men's group that I actually initially found through a counselor. So I did go see a counselor for a little while, which I would say is more accessible than a therapist. Usually a bit lower cost, and it's an opportunity to have a one-on-one session where you can, talk about some of the things that you're struggling with in a little bit more of an anonymous setting, which is nice. So this counselor actually ran a weekly men's group. And so there's about 10 people in each of his sessions. And so I joined one of those, and yeah, once a week, the 10 of us would all meet together, and the counselor would kind of lead the discussion. But we basically had an opportunity to go around in a circle and basically just share what it was that we were struggling with either that week or just things that we'd been struggling with in general. It was really, really nice to just be able to get that out in the open, and then to also recognize there's other guys who are going through the same things that I was going through or their own struggles, but just sometimes just hearing that other people are dealing with stuff too is helpful to recognize that you're not alone in what you're going through.
Yeah.
Have you experienced anything like that?
Sort of. I've definitely, I mean, I've gone through my rounds of therapy for many years. I was kind of coerced into it initially. I was with someone who said, you need to get therapy, otherwise this relationship's not going to work, essentially. So I'm like, all right, if it's for the relationship, I'll do it. And then I actually found that it was actually very helpful for me and actually led me to ending that relationship because I realized through therapy that it wasn't right for me. So I don't know if that was the outcome that they wanted, but
Yeah, not that's sure that's what she was looking for initially
no.
when she recommended that, but
uh,
probably better in the long run, right?
yeah, I think so. I don't think we were a good match for the long run anyway. So I think that and then having opened that door of therapy allowed me to just be like, okay, it's not as scary as I think. And essentially, how often do you, as a man, have outlets that you could just talk at someone and they're just going to listen to you? I find it's very far and few between, but you're paying someone to listen to
Yeah.
you, and that's kind of a nice feeling and just in and of itself.
Yeah. Do you find that that's true in a lot of cases? I mean, you said that you probably wouldn't have gone to therapy if it hadn't been for I guess it was your girlfriend at the time who kind of pushed you into this. And I feel like that's a common theme I hear from when you do hear of guys going to therapy. It's like, oh yeah, I had somebody else who pushed
Hmm.
me to do it. It
Yeah.
seems rare that a guy will seek it out on his own.
Yeah, I think initially I think I had to get coerced into doing it because I don't think I would have ever sought it out. And it was kind of that fear that I had mentioned earlier is just like, what happens if I uncover something about myself that I think might be too much for me to handle? Mental health struggles run kind of rampant in my own family. Maybe something about being Asian and repressing all your emotions is just not good for your mental health. But like we have, like physically, we're all very, very fit and active and very capable. But it seems that, especially on the male side, something snaps, like whether it's Alzheimer's, dementia, schizophrenia, those type of things run pretty heavily in my family. And
Mm.
unfortunately, because the older generations of my family were immigrants here, they didn't really have time to like dissect, like what's going wrong with me? What should I do to like manage this stress? They just were kind of like go, 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 survival mode. You must like fight against xenophobia, being an immigrant here. And I think that mental health kind of just fell to the wayside. And then it's my generation now that is starting to think, well, maybe we should pump the brakes a little bit. Maybe we need to start reevaluating things. But you know even within my own immediate family, going to therapy has quite a bit of a stigma.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until we had suffered a pretty severe loss in the family that it started being like, all right, this it's just in your face now. You can't escape this anymore. Yeah.
Do you think that now that you've had some experience with therapy,
Mhm.
do you find that you're glad that you went? Obviously, it helped in that one situation you're talking about with the relationship and kind
Yeah.
of determining that that wasn't the right scenario. But do you feel, I guess, that therapy was necessary, or do you think if there had been some alternate
Mhm.
way to kind of process what you were
Yeah.
thinking about, feeling, that you would have gone that route instead?
It's a good question. I After the very first therapist I had, it definitely uh, opened the doors as an option. And I remember, after major life changing situations that I went through, after going the first time, I was like, all right, I got to go to therapy. I'm not coping well with this at all. And it was kind of was like almost my first line of defense. And it kind of just gave me the tools so that, and kind of a perspective shift that allowed me to see things in a way that was more manageable. I think kind of
Hmm.
the big takeaways that I got from therapy was the idea of you're always juggling like balls in the air, right? And think of each of those balls being, a task, a responsibility that you have, and some are rubber, and if you drop it, it'll bounce, and maybe it'll bounce back into your hand at a later time, or maybe it'll bounce into someone else's hand, in which case it's no longer your problem. But some of those balls that you're juggling are glass, and if you drop it, it's a lot harder to repair, or maybe sometimes impossible to repair. And it's best to identify which of those are of your responsibilities are glass and which are rubber. And that kind of
And
helped me.
you've been on point with the analogies lately. I love this analogy as well.
Thank you. But that kind of helped me reframe things because I was a people pleaser. I was saying yes to literally everything that came my way. And if someone needed help, I would literally burn myself to the ground in order to just help them, right? And my therapist said, like, well, you have to start thinking about every time you say yes to something, technically you're saying no to something else. And
Mm.
that kind of reframed me as like, well, I think I'm saying no to myself then. And I need to start taking care of myself. Otherwise, how are you supposed to put on the oxygen mask on the person next to you if you're passed out next to them because you haven't put an oxygen mask on yourself?
Hmm.
And then the other analogy that like really stuck with me was about dealing with grief and loss. And that was that grief and loss are two sides of the same coin. This is actually wasn't from therapy. This was from a pastor that came and talked to us about, the funeral services, and he was going to speak it, and he was going to try to talk to us about, coexisting with grief. That grief and joy exist on the same coin, and that someone who has not experienced grief can't actually experience as much joy as someone who's experienced a great depth of grief. Because how can you know the presence of something unless you feel the absence of it as well? And my therapist kind of did the same thing. And I think maybe it's the collective consciousness talking about, this quantum idea that two things can exist at the same time. It's probability. We're all wavelengths anyway. Yes, you might experience extreme bouts of grief, depression, anxiety, but on the same bit, you can also experience the immense amount of joy with knowing that, there was love there. And grief only exists, it creates a vacuum because there was just so much love and no outlet to send it towards. I think that those two things between the juggling and understanding, the grief and joy are on the same coin. Just really reframed my entire mindset about everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the can't experience light without dark, right?
Yeah,
You need
exactly.
both.
It's the yin yang, of things, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for anybody, watching this, obviously, hearing that your experiences with therapy were positive, sounds like you've you found some other ideas elsewhere
Mhm.
as well. Again, I think the stigma is breaking down on therapy, but there's still a lot of that hesitation to move forward with something like that. So
Mhm. Do
what
you
are your thoughts on,
okay.
somebody who's maybe coming to the point where they say, you know what, I think I need help, but
Mhm.
therapy is just too far for me.
Well, there's a few barriers of entry, right? One is the cost, right? Like, and initially I went through like All Path or something. I would need to find it again, but essentially there are options out there where you get essentially subsidized therapy, where if you are make below a certain amount, and it's not like you could just say what that you make any amount even if you don't, and it's usually people who are trying to get their hours in to work towards a PhD,
Hmm.
or maybe get there's a prerequisite if you want to get your master's in therapy as well. So they will sometimes give out hours at a discounted rate, and that's what I did for my first therapist. Just know that the quality is probably not at the same level as someone who has obviously more experience in their belt and might charge significantly more. But if it's any
But it still
testament,
gives you that opportunity to get things off your mind, right?
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think if it's any testament, all my therapists after that, I spent, out of my own money, and it is a lot of money. I'm not going to discount that, but I thought it was so important that I get my head straight that I was willing to pay whatever it took to get there. Um, and I paid, upwards of like 150, $180 an hour to,
Mm.
kind of get, the quality therapy that I needed.
Yep.
But it is like you get what you pay for, right? It within like 3 to 4 sessions, I was kind of good with the, more expensive therapist, and with the, $50 or less an hour, it definitely was. It took a lot more sessions just to get anywhere. So, kind of like, do you value your time or your money, kind of thing.
Hmm. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. What are some barriers that you think kind of prevent people from going into
Yeah.
therapy?
I mean, I think the one that you pointed out is a big one, of cost being one. And then the other one that I was going to mention is that you talked about was that fear of going too deep.
Yeah.
For a lot of men, I think, we struggle to deal with those deeper emotions sometimes,
Mm,
and I think there's a fear of, what's going to happen in this therapist room. And I think part of it is just guys will kind of put themselves into a spiral, thinking that everything's going to come out all at once, and
mm,
it's going to be, horrible, and I'm going to have all these dark thoughts. And I don't know if that's always the case. I mean, I think in a lot of cases therapy is more gradual process. And the thing is too, I mean, if you do a session and you don't like it, there's no one forcing you to continue to go. But I think it's just, part of it too is just probably, I guess, a little bit of laziness. I don't think that's the right word, but just I'm good. I'm just gonna keep doing what I've been doing. Like, yeah, I'm struggling with these things, but that's just how it's always been.
yeah.
So it's not laziness. That's not the right word, but just this is how things have always been.
Yeah.
So why change things up? Why try to address this? I've never done it. I've never done that before. I think, I mean, at least that was for me. What
Yeah.
held me back was just
Do you
like,
think it's
I'm
the
good.
same like paradigm where, like you have that kink in your back for like 5 years, and then you're like, I don't need to go to the doctor. I'm good.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think if you've been carrying, emotional weight, emotional baggage for a long time, then why all of a sudden would you be like, oh, okay, now it's time to go address it? It's just you just keep adding it on, you keep adding it on, and
Mhm,
for most, I mean, I think a lot of people in general, but definitely for guys, it's
mhm,
it's very much a just keep pushing forward.
mhm.
That's all there is.
Did you
And,
ever watch?
and
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Did
No,
you
no,
ever
go
watch
ahead.
that King of the Hill episode, or do you watch King of the Hill?
A little bit. I haven't seen them all, but yeah.
There's a one that kind of cropped up. It's like his niece who lives with him. She's like really upset about something, and she's like, "Do you ever cry, Hank?" And it's like, "Luann, whenever I feel anything, I just shove it down." And it's like, is it supposed to like feel like make you feel sick? It's like, "Yep." That's totally normal. And when you feel that, you know that it's working, and you just gotta shove that one down too. But yeah.
First off, that's a great Hank Hill
Yeah.
impersonation. Second of all, yep, that's spot on accurate.
Yeah.
There's that reminds me, I don't know if you know John Mulaney, he's a comedian,
Yeah.
stand-up comedian, and he's talks about how I'll just hold all my emotions here and then one day I'll die.
I think I've seen that one.
And it's like, yeah, that kind of is true sometimes. You just and it's just because that's how, I don't know if it's just how partly how we're wired or societal trends, but
Yeah.
yeah, that was the case for me for sure for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about, obviously we talk about balding a lot on this, but
Mhm.
you know, I faced a time when I was pretty depressed, living in a new city by myself, didn't have many friends in the area, no family in the area, and just was kind of living a life where I would go into work, sit in a cubicle, come home, and just, you know, there'd be periods of time where I would just be by myself, you know, a
Mhm.
lot, other than when I was at work and there'd be coworkers around, but that didn't really feel like, you know, community or friendship really.
Yeah.
And it was just a struggle. It was just a period of time where I was just
Mm.
not happy, not living the life I wanted. And I just powered through. You know, I didn't even really think about an alternative.
Yeah, I kind of had that, early on in my career too. I had moved, away from home, and I was starting my job, and
Hmm.
I had roommates and stuff, but I just never felt like I was maybe understood, or that I had what it took to, and this is again before therapy too. And I just felt like this severe amount of loneliness, even though there were people around me. It's like I felt like a little bubble within this giant moving ecosystem that I just was not a part of. And I think there's a couple things. Like there's a study that was being done, like it's how men and women like kind of cope with like negative feelings, and they found that like a majority of men talking about our feelings actually just makes us feel neutral, like it's the same or worse. And that for women, it's actually the opposite. Like talking about their feelings makes them feel better. That's why you have the gossip circles, stereotypically.
Hmm.
But then for men, doing things, even completely unrelated to whatever negative feelings you're having, actually does make you feel better, right? Like going to the gym, going to, a rock climbing wall, going on a hike, and maybe these are things that might be more accessible than therapy that you can do. And I remember there was a time where, I was doing therapy as well, but something that really helped, and it seemed to help a lot of guys in our little cohort. We were all working together, and I started essentially. Well, I'm not supposed to talk about it, but I started a fight club of sorts. I knew I was a black belt, and I still am, I guess. I am a black belt, and I said they said, do you know how to fight? It's like, yeah, I do actually, and I'll teach you, and I taught them the basics, and then we put on like every Thursday, Friday, we put on boxing gloves and literally just beat the crap out of each other. And then until we were like exhausted and like laying on the ground. And then after we got Taco Bell, and literally like that
Hmm.
was like I feel like one of the peaks of my life was just like, giving each other black eyes. And, one guy broke his foot, and
Yeah.
all of them talk fondly about that time. And then
Hmm.
even to this day, like they'll say like, hey, you ever think about starting that up again? Because, I really could, go a few rounds. It's weird, but it's like,
No,
I think,
you're right.
yeah.
You got me thinking about when I was in college. Our
Mhm.
school was too small to have like traditional fraternities and
Sure.
sororities, but that the house that I lived in was as close to a fraternity as you'd get at the college I
Sure.
went to. And we once a month we would do like a house meeting, and then after the meeting, this was an all guys house, we would literally everyone would just like strip down to their underwear, and like we'd cover ourselves in shaving cream and like run around the campus like wild animals, and we'd like sing our house song, and it was probably to everybody else it was like the cringiest thing ever, but it was, looking back on it, it was pretty like therapeutic in a way. It was
Yeah.
just like being with like a group of guys. I mean, some of them were buddies, some of them were guys I didn't know that well, and
Mhm.
we're all just doing this like crazy kind of stupid thing together.
Yeah.
Like releasing some of that energy. We're literally running around the entire, campus, and just feeling like you're part of that community was very therapeutic in a way. But I did want to also circle back to, you said for men and women kind of handle, this differently. I think one thing women are pretty good at is like self-care.
Yes.
And I think that might look different for a guy, what a self-care day might look like. But, like just a couple weeks ago, I was having like kind of an off couple of days, and I said, you know what? I'm going to just take like half a day and I'm going to watch two of the Lord of the Rings movies, because that is like the thing that just brings me, like joy and like a feeling of being like home. And there's
Yeah.
just something about those movies that, they're very nostalgic.
Mhm.
I have a deep connection with them.
Yeah,
And
they're great
so I was
movies.
like, I just need this today.
Yeah.
And just doing that, just something that I knew would make me feel good, just kind of helped me get out of that
Mhm.
funk. And to your point, it wasn't like, oh, I need to just talk out my feelings here. It was
Mhm.
like, I just need to do something that I know I really enjoy doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
You
think
ever take a day and do anything like that?
I've done a couple of mental health days, and watching one Lord of the Rings extended edition is already your half day right there.
Yeah.
But how you manage?
Maybe it was the whole day. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna say. I have, and I took a walk, and this is when I was still trying to befriend a bunch of cats, and I would just walk around. If there was a cat who came up to me, I'd be like, just chat with him, and then move on to the next one, and then afterwards, I just came home, and then I just sat down and played like 3 hours of a game that I had been wanting to play for a long time. And I think that's a big part of it, right? Like being able to feel like you can do things for yourself. I think oftentimes a male's role is a role of self-sacrifice, part of the male fantasy. And, because we live in such a structured society where everything's already been built, I think a lot of men might feel that there's really no purpose to their life, right? I think, at least I can attest to this. I'm not going to speak for you, but I would say that most men fantasize about this idea of sacrificing yourself, giving up your life, defending off a horde so that your friends or family can escape. That's kind of like how I'd want to go out. Everyone's like, I'd like to go out, in like a nice cozy bed, and I just fall asleep and then I die. And then it's like, nah.
You want to go out in a blaze of glory.
Yeah, yeah, alien horde coming our way, and I gotta buy you guys 5 minutes so that you can get onto the helicopter. That's how I want to go out.
That would
Like
be epic. Yeah.
like Boromir, like that's how we all want to go out.
Yeah.
That's the indomitable human spirit right there. So
Yeah, no, I can relate to that for sure.
yeah,
I think that's probably, maybe not a universal thing, but probably pretty universal for a lot of guys. It's like that
yeah,
fantasy of, being the hero at the end. But I think, to that point, you really can't be that person if you're not also doing. It's like that, another analogy, when you're on a plane and they tell you to put your own mask on, before helping others. It's because
hmm
you need to make sure that you're good so that you can show up best for others. Although you kind of were leading into another interesting point, which is today, finding that purpose as a guy. There's not really those epic battles to be fought. There's not, hopefully there's no, crazy wars or anything, incoming, but finding purpose without that type of, alien battle that you were talking about is not always easy. Do you feel like you have started to find that purpose for yourself?
I definitely had a little bit of an existential crisis when I hit 30. My goal was to become a manager, have a house, start a family, and it seemed like I had all of that incoming. Either I had it or it was on the way. And because of that, I felt like, what's the point anymore? I've beat the game, and saw all my friends around me. They, a lot of them are still struggling to get a house today, and it's like just by pure, fortune and circumstance that I was able to get mine. And it was like, well, I'm here, I'm at the very top, like what do I do now, right? And I think it was kind of forced upon me. Long story short, we lost our child shortly after he was born, and that kind of crumbled everything. All the preconceived notions that I had about my life were completely turned on its head. And then on top of that, I ended up getting laid off. So then there's my managerial job gone too. So it felt like everything, I had reached the top, and then it just the landscape completely changed on me. And in which case, also my perspective. And I don't think some people don't ever have something that turns their life upside down, where you might just be stuck at the top or maybe stuck at the bottom, and you just have no sense of purpose at that point. And I think at that point I started turning more spiritually into myself to try to find those answers. And I actually found a lot of fulfillment in doing so. I started reading a lot about Zen Buddhism, and then I started also correlating it to reading the Bible a long time ago. Whether you're religious or not, there's an idea from Nietzsche that God is dead and we killed him, right? And the idea is that if you have the lay of the law, which is at the top, you think that there's a divine goodness that you can have, and you remove that, right? Where does that put humans? Well, now humans are where God once was, and our ideas, our desires, our thoughts of morality is always in flux. It depends on the day, it depends on the hour, it depends on the second, and that always changes. And without that higher level, this understanding that we are all one and that there's a larger community that exists beyond ourselves, that you start to have that existential crisis. It's like, oh, I'm already at the top, right? I am God, right? Everything is at my fingertips. Everything that I ever want can validate me by doing this over and over again. And I think coming back to that and saying, you know what, there is something greater than me. It's either the world, it's the universe, it's the collective consciousness, it's God, whatever you want to call it. There's something greater than myself that I need to start to pay into. Otherwise, I'm going to feel like a dark soul in my pit because, I don't know.
There's a lot of good stuff in there, and I think kind of something I want to, I guess, pinpoint in on is this feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people find that, like when they join the army, the military, they feel like they're part of a bigger purpose. I think there is something to that, because when you feel like you're at the top, there's nothing more, then you start thinking, well, what's the point? And I had a kind of a similar experience you're talking about. Well, I've got the house, I've got the job, what else is there? And I had that exact same sort of thought we bought this house year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my childhood dreams, the thing I said, like, if I get this, then I'll have truly made it. This probably sounds weird. It was to have a hot tub. That was like
nice.
It's probably like a very childlike, sort of like, oh, that's what a rich person has is a hot tub. Now I know it's not as big of a deal, but it was like, okay, I got the house and it got the hot tub, and it's like, okay, I did it. I did the thing that I'd always, since I was a little kid, I just sort of had in the back of my mind, like, this will be the moment where that's it. And so then you do get to that point, you go, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
And I was kind of stuck in that for a little while, where I was like, this is it. There's literally nothing else that, like, I have, the job, the house, wife, what else is there? And that's actually why, I started doing, videos like these, and I wanted to think of a way where I could, potentially start helping those who are maybe, in the spot that I was at, back in my early 20s, where I was a little lost and depressed. And, obviously that's led to some cool things, like me connecting with you and being able to do these conversations and hopefully, get that message out to people who need to hear it. But that's been really helpful to me, just in terms of kind of finding some purpose, something to drive me forward. So I think, sorry, I know I've been rambling for a little bit, but
I want to hear it. Yeah.
I think there is something to be said where, when you are younger, you're kind of trying to figure out, okay, how do I get to whatever is my goal is? And then when you do kind of hit that goal, then you do start thinking, okay, now how can I give back? How can I, help others to achieve what they want to achieve?
Yeah.
So it's just at different stages in life, you may have, different things that motivate you and drive you. It's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, like I had this epiphany, like when I was not working for 6 months, that, like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs? So for anyone who doesn't know, it's the very bottom is like food, water, shelter, right? And then as you go up, it starts to become, having longer and longer staying power. And how at the very top is legacy, right? And I started to liken it to each of those needs represents like how long you can stay on the planet, right? If you don't have water, right, you're not going to last longer than 3 days, right? If you don't have food, you're not going to last longer than 3 weeks. And if you don't have shelter, you're not going to last, a few months. And then at the very top is legacy, being like after you're gone physically, like you won't last longer than your life, right? I think that's kind of where we ended up, where it's like you have all your needs are met now, right? And you have this existential crisis because, well, how now you need to think, what is the point of my life now? Is it just going to disappear the moment I'm gone, or do I want to leave a lasting impression where I can live longer than my own lifespan? And that can come in a variety of ways, whether it's through, helping others, that's the easy one, or, setting up some way that you can continuously help people even after long after you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's that whole idea that, like my mom always said, like if once you've made your money, right, then figure out how you can get other people to make their money too. And it could be anything. It's just, but that's how the cycle works, right? Like when you amass wealth or any type of resource, right? Think of it like the force or chakra or chi, right? It has to flow. We are just like a giant circuitry board, right? If it gets blocked up anywhere, then that's not good for the entire ecosystem, right? You might feel like you have enough, right? But everyone else might be suffering around you, in which case, what's the point? So you have to be able to have things flow and flow through you in order for things to actually be healthy. And you will also feel fulfilled, even though you're giving away resources. Circle back to other strategies, and I kind of make it very precise and prescriptive about strategies that we can use to cope with mental health struggles that are outside of therapy.
Yeah, I think if I'm kind of just looking at it as like, okay, what are the simplest ways to, if you're not going to a therapist, what are some really simple ways that you can kind of address and help yourself maybe get out of a rut? And I think that one that we talked about before of having like a self-care day where you're like, okay, I know something's up. I can't quite figure it out. Something's off. I'm not feeling good. I need to take a day, or maybe you don't have the luxury of taking a full day to yourself, but some time that you can section off where you are going to do something that you truly enjoy. I think that's something that we really shouldn't take for granted. Like you deserve to spend time with yourself and treat yourself well. And I think that can be enormously helpful, just showing yourself, self-love, self-care, and proving to yourself by doing that can be very beneficial.
Do you have a sense, like for me, even, I struggle with allowing myself that mental health day or saying that I am deserving to do that because, the idea of the grind is super ingrained in our Western culture. Do you have ways that you can kind of get over that so that you can allow yourself and actually do lean into and relax into enjoying the stuff that you love?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're on that grind set and you're really working towards something and you don't feel like you have the ability to take that day, I mean, in my opinion, if in order to put in the productive time to the things that you want, then at some point you have to disconnect a little bit. And again, maybe it's not a full day, but it's at least some time that you are intentionally setting aside to say, I'm doing this because I know it's going to help me with the grind later on. It's going to help my mindset with whatever it is I'm working towards. I mean, it's been studied that is beneficial to step away from something that you are just bashing on as hard as you can, to step away from it and get, a fresh mindset on it. I mean, there's been times where I've been, thinking about a problem, just it's been circling around in my head over and over and over. And
Yeah.
then I get a good night's sleep. I wake up and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's the solution right
Yeah.
there. Like if you can just remind yourself that this is actually beneficial to whatever it is that you're grinding towards, whatever it is that you're working towards, it may actually help you get there faster by taking
Yeah.
that time to yourself. That's
Yeah.
what I would. I know it's tough. I mean, I know it's tough when you're,
Mhm.
in that work mode and you don't want to step away, but it truly is beneficial.
There's a kind of to answer my own question. Like there was a another analogy. It's a Taoist like parable. There's a man running away from a tiger in the woods in the jungle, right? And that's a pretty terrible situation to be in, right? And sometimes you feel that way. You know, you're being chased by the responsibilities of your life, and you're running, 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 and he falls into a hole. Which again, now the problem that he once was in just became exponentially worse. And he fell down into the hole and grabs onto a root from a tree, right? And at the bottom of the hole, he sees it's a pit of vipers. Like there's just hundreds of them down there. And he says, well, great. Now the problem is so bad. Like I am completely stuck in place, right? Where the tiger is like swiping from up above, the vipers are biting from below, and I'm just hanging onto this root, right? And there's really no way out of this. And to make matters worse, there's a mouse who's deciding to bite on the root of the tree. So now it feels like you're running out of time before you have to make a decision. And in these moments, it might feel like you are absolutely trapped in whatever circumstance you're in. And if you just take a moment just to see and appreciate the moment that you're in, even if it's terrible, then you might miss that within arm's reach, that there is a beehive that's empty and that there's honey dripping from it. So you can actually enjoy the honey in the process. And in doing so, you can be aware that, while things are awful, there are moments that are glimmers within that awful moment. And lo and behold, while you're enjoying the honey, the tiger makes a misstep and falls into the pit, and the vipers go after the tiger instead. And then now an opportunity has presented itself that you can now climb out of the hole. But had you just focused purely on the negative, you would have missed the honey that was there the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
All to say that the parable means that the universe and everything around you is constantly in motion. Just because you are stuck doesn't mean that the world is stuck with you. Eventually, the world might shift in a point where it is in your favor to then move again. Kind of going back
Hmm.
to, your break, that
Yeah.
if you focus purely on all the negative stuff, then you miss out on the beauty that is life, and understanding that you will always be chased by a tiger at some point in your life. It's
Yeah.
just about your perspective about it. Going back to joy and
Yeah.
grief, same coin.
I like it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to find those moments in life where you can take enjoyment, because I mean, life is short, and if we're not finding those things that we can enjoy, then then that's kind of sad that we and it's tough because we get stuck in those negative spirals. But that's a good reminder that we need to look for the positive, because sometimes that can help lift us out of a situation we didn't think we could get out of. I wanted to get your thoughts on something. I saw this on Reddit the other day, I think, because one of the things, I know I'm a little bit guilty of this, but like when you know a guy says, I'm just kind of depressed, or they're feeling depressed or down on something, the response a lot of times is just get to the gym, work
Yeah.
it out, just lift some weights, get it all out of your system. And so the person who posted this was like, I don't have the energy to even get to the gym. Don't tell me to, just go to the gym and that'll fix everything. Do you, do you have any thoughts on this? I mean, do you think that sometimes that is sort of the default, oh, if you're feeling depressed, just go do a workout?
This one I always liked was the answer to everything is salt water. I guess salt, but salt water in particular. So if you're sad, you can cry, right? Your tears are salty. If you're frustrated or angry, you can go to the gym and their sweat is salty. And when problems seem so grand and so big that you can't even fathom how to even approach it, go to the ocean and see that everything that you ever worried about is a lot smaller than it might appear to be. And maybe that's the solution, right? Gym is only a fraction of what all that is, right? And I think it kind of correlates to like your mind, body, and spirit, right? Crying when your mind is broken will help alleviate some of the tension that is afflicting your mind. When you feel like your body's broken, then you can go to the gym to kind of strengthen that. And then it's going to the ocean fulfills your spiritual energy. And I think that when you feel so depressed that you can't see a way forward or anything, it's usually because your spirit is broken. And it's hard to fathom that, especially in our very secular society nowadays, where we don't really believe in higher powers or anything like that. But we are all just energy, and we get energy from either being in the sun, like we're all vitamin D deficient apparently, like being around people, even if you don't talk to them, just but sitting in a cafe and realizing that all these things are moving around you might like energize you to say, okay, things are moving and I don't need to move in order, and I don't even need to spend energy to see that the world is moving. Or just seeing hiking, going on a hike and seeing a nice view might just ground you again into thinking like, all right, while I might be down, the world can also be up, and maybe the world might be down and I might be up. But
Yeah.
filling your spiritual bucket might be the answer for that depressive state that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, just the idea of getting outside
Hmm.
is it's crazy because today, I mean, I think one of the big reasons for a lot of mental health issues is because we're all spending so much time online.
Yeah.
We're spending so much time indoors, even when we're connecting with people. I mean, I'd love it if we could do this face to face. We're
Oh,
doing
that'd be
this,
awesome.
online. So, and even some of our social connections are still virtual in that sense.
Hmm.
And we are very social creatures inherently.
Yeah.
We're connected to the outside. And if we don't spend that time being out in nature, being with community, that's why, one other thing I think a simple way to kind of lift yourself out of maybe a depressed state or whatever is joining some type of group like a kickball league or a bowling
Hmm.
league,
Yeah.
just something that's getting you that more social interaction in person,
Hmm.
because again, inherently we're social creatures and we need that connection. Even for someone like me, I'm an introvert, but
Yeah.
I know I still need that social connection from time to time. Maybe
Hmm.
not as much as others, but it's
Yeah.
still important. And I think if you get trapped in for me, I was in that introvert cycle for a long time. I referenced it earlier. It's like it's when you've been alone, for because of different circumstances, then it's harder to want to break out of your shell
Yeah.
because your comfort zone gets smaller and smaller the less you use it. So if you're constantly staying introverted, staying inside, the less inclined you are going to want to get out there and socialize. But that's exactly what you need to do. Yeah, finding some group, a run club,
Hmm.
that's a great way to combine multiple, really healthy outlets, a social connection, get exercise. Potentially you might be running out in, depending on where you live, maybe you're out in nature. Otherwise, maybe you're running in the city. But either way, just getting out, getting that sunlight,
Yeah.
making the social connections. I think that's a really simple way to. Again, it's not therapy, right? But
Mhm.
it's very therapeutic.
I think doing things that you love and allowing yourself to do things that you love opens doors, because then you can find other people that do what you love, and you can start to see that you can start to build a community out of it, right? You and I both came to the same realization that, we've kind of made it in our own, goals, and so we decided to both hop on to sharing our experiences online, and that's what we thought we wanted to do and what we liked, and ended up finding each other, and then now there's a small community that we're starting to form. So
Yeah,
I think that allowing yourself to do what you love only will fulfill you and give more opportunities to do more of what you love.
agreed.
Yeah.
That seems like the perfect
Yeah.
spot to wrap things up. So
Agreed.
yeah,
Yeah. Thanks everyone for watching. Yeah. Stay strong,
yeah.
and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye.